What if everything we thought we knew about Meghan Markle was wrong? What if behind the fairy tale wedding, the dazzling global headlines, and the promises of a modern monarchy lay something else? Something carefully plotted long before the world ever saw the princess-to-be walking into Windsor Castle. Thomas Markle, Meghan's estranged father, says he has proof. And what he reveals is not just about a daughter and a father at odds. It's about an ambition that, he claims, was set in motion years before Meghan ever met Prince Harry. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. This is not the story of love conquering old traditions or a young couple breaking free from outdated rules. This is a story about power, about image, about control, and perhaps, most painfully, about betrayal, not just between Meghan and the royal family, but between Meghan and her own family. It starts, Thomas says, with an inbox full of emails. Emails he wasn't meant to see. Emails that, to him, painted a picture of a woman with a plan, not just a hope or a dream, but a blueprint, a timeline, a strategy to enter the most famous family in the world, elevate her public image, and within 2 years, walk away with everything she needed to become untouchable. Let's go back to where it all began. Meghan Markle was not the first actress to fall in love with royalty, but she was the first in the digital age. By the time her relationship with Prince Harry became public, she had already learned the rules of the celebrity game: control the narrative or be crushed by it. She had seen what the British press could do. She had watched other women, royal and not, become tabloid targets. She knew the cost of silence and the power of a well-timed interview. But according to Thomas, Meghan wasn't just reacting to fame as it came. She was preparing for it before the first cameras arrived. In the emails Thomas claims to have seen, Meghan allegedly laid out her hopes and frustrations to close friends. One line, he says, haunts him to this day. "This is just the beginning. 2 years, then I'm free." For Thomas, reading those words was like being struck. 2 years? Free from what? From whom? At the time, he didn't know how to interpret it. He told himself it was just the language of someone overwhelmed by media pressure, someone afraid of the life she was about to step into. But as time went on, as Meghan and Harry's relationship with the royal family deteriorated, those early words began to echo louder. Thomas wasn't invited to the wedding. You probably remember the headlines. The heart surgery, the letters back and forth, the televised pleas, the paparazzi photos. Thomas watching his daughter's wedding from a small TV in Mexico, his heart divided between pride and heartbreak. But what few people know is what Thomas was thinking as he watched Meghan walk down that aisle. He wasn't just thinking of the father-daughter moments they'd never have again. He was thinking of the warning signs he had ignored. Thomas describes Meghan as always being fiercely ambitious. As a child, she knew how to command a room. As a teenager, she knew how to work the system, whether it was getting teachers to grant her extensions or finding ways to stand out in auditions. She wasn't manipulative, he says. She was strategic. She knew how to make people like her, and she knew when to walk away when they didn't. After the wedding, Thomas hoped things would settle. He hoped Meghan would call, that she would explain, that the distance between them was just temporary, the product of too many flashing cameras and too many voices in her ear. But the call never came. Instead, Thomas watched from afar as Meghan and Harry went from royal darlings to tabloid villains. He saw the headlines turn, the fairy tale collapse, the Sussexes retreat to Canada, then to California. And all the while, he replayed those emails in his mind. The words about 2 years, the hints about freedom, the quiet suggestion that the royal phase was never meant to last. He wasn't alone. Behind palace walls, aides were whispering about Meghan's frustration with protocol, the clash between Hollywood and the monarchy, the staff who left in tears, the insistence on doing things her own way. For Thomas, it all fit into the pattern he now believed had been there from the start. But here's where the story turns. Not into revenge, not into a father trying to smear his daughter, but into something much sadder. Thomas Markle does not speak with rage. He speaks with sorrow, with confusion, with the bewilderment of a father who no longer knows his own child. "I'm not angry," he has said in interviews. "I just want the truth." The truth, as he sees it, is that Meghan saw the royal family not as a life sentence, but as a launch pad. A way to transform herself from a moderately successful actress into a global icon. And once she had the platform, once she had the attention, She didn't need the royal machine anymore. Some will say Thomas is bitter, that he is projecting his own pain onto his daughter's choices, that he is being used by the media, hungry for scraps of royal gossip. Others will say he is the only one brave enough to call out what many have suspected but been too polite to say. What do you think? What does it mean when a father says his daughter planned her royal exit from the very beginning? Does it change how we see Meghan Markle? Does it change how we see Harry? Does it change how we see the monarchy itself? Because at the heart of this story is not just celebrity or scandal. It is something far more universal. It is the question of what we owe our families, what we owe ourselves, whether ambition is a betrayal or whether it is survival. Thomas's story is messy. It is uncomfortable. It forces us to look at the gap between public image and private intention. It forces us to ask, how much of what we believe about anyone, famous or not, is just the story they've sold us? As we peel back the layers of Thomas's claims, we will not find simple answers. But we will find something more valuable, the raw, human tensions that sit beneath every headline, every public statement, every family fracture. In the chapters to come, we will trace Meghan's path from Hollywood to Windsor, from royal duties to Netflix deals, from private emails to public exile. We will hear Thomas's side, but we will also hear the voices that challenge it. And we will try, as best we can, to understand what really happened behind the fairy tale and what it cost everyone involved. Are you ready to look closer? Because once you do, you may never see this story the same way again. Thomas Markle sits in the quiet of his modest home in Rosarito, Mexico. The sound of the ocean is faint in the distance, but his living room is silent except for the occasional creak of the old ceiling fan. He speaks slowly, carefully, with the weary tone of a man who has carried the weight of disappointment and regret for too long. His voice, though soft, carries a deep sadness as he begins recounting the memories that have haunted him. The world may have moved on from the spectacle of Meghan and Harry's royal life, but for Thomas, every day is another confrontation with the question that won't go away. How did it come to this? How did the close, loving relationship he once had with his daughter disintegrate so completely? He recalls Meghan's childhood fondly, but with a trace of melancholy. She was a bright, curious child, precocious and full of charm. From an early age, she had a way of making everyone around her feel special. Teachers praised her, neighbors adored her, and Thomas was endlessly proud. He tells stories of helping her memorize lines for school plays, taking her to tap dancing classes, and watching her light up whenever she performed. There were signs, even then, that she was destined for something bigger. She wasn't content blending into the background. She wanted to stand out. Thomas pauses, reflecting on the years when Meghan's ambition was a source of pride. Her determination was relentless, and it inspired him. When she told him she wanted to be an actress, he supported her without hesitation. Even as she struggled to land roles, facing rejection after rejection, Thomas encouraged her to keep going. He believed in her talent and her ability to succeed. As she climbed the ladder of Hollywood, landing small roles and eventually her breakthrough on Suits, Thomas remained her biggest cheerleader. They talked often, sometimes every day. She would share stories from set, discuss scripts, and confide in him about the pressures of the industry. He was her sounding board and her confidant. But as Meghan's fame grew, something began to shift. The calls became less frequent. The conversations felt more superficial. Thomas admits he initially brushed it off, assuming she was simply busy. She was building her career, after all, and he didn't want to get in the way. Yet a gnawing feeling began to creep in, an invisible wall that seemed to rise between them, even as he convinced himself it was temporary. Thomas speaks about the moment he first heard rumors of Meghan's relationship with Prince Harry. Like many fathers, his reaction was a mix of disbelief and joy. His daughter was dating a prince, a real prince. It was surreal. When Meghan confirmed it to him directly, he felt an enormous pride but also anxiety. He knew that dating a royal would bring scrutiny far beyond anything Meghan had ever experienced. He worried about the British press, about the palace protocols, about the culture clash. He wondered whether Meghan, despite her confidence, truly understood what she was walking into. But beneath those worries was trust. He trusted that Meghan would navigate it wisely, that she would remain the daughter he knew so well. He supported her fully, even when he didn't understand everything about royal life. When the engagement was announced, he was thrilled. He dreamed of walking his daughter down the aisle, of standing proudly at Windsor Castle, of seeing her embraced by a global audience. Then, Thomas says, came the emails. He describes sitting at his computer one evening, reading through a chain of messages Meghan had forwarded to him, emails between her and a close friend. The tone of the emails was casual, almost breezy, but what they revealed unsettled him deeply. One line in particular seared itself into his mind. 2 years, and I'll have everything I need. Thomas didn't know how to interpret it at first. It sounded cryptic, but he couldn't imagine his daughter being cynical or calculating. He told himself it was just a figure of speech, a harmless expression of anxiety. But he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more behind those words. In hindsight, he says, that line now seems prophetic. Everything that followed, the wedding, the royal tours, the pregnancy, the mounting tensions with the palace, fits into a timeline that Thomas believes was set long before Meghan ever walked down the aisle. He wonders whether she had always seen royal life as temporary, as a stepping stone towards something else. Thomas describes his confusion and heartbreak as his relationship with Meghan deteriorated in the months leading up to the wedding. He was criticized in the press for staging paparazzi photos, a decision he now admits was a mistake, driven by pride and naivety. He wanted to look good for his daughter, to show the world he was worthy of being the father of a duchess. But that misstep became the catalyst for a total breakdown in communication. He recounts how Meghan stopped taking his calls, how he received messages through intermediaries rather than directly from her. He describes feeling exiled, shut out from one of the most significant events in his daughter's life. He watched the wedding from a distance, feeling both proud and devastated. As Thomas speaks, there is no anger in his voice, only sadness. He doesn't blame Meghan entirely. He knows she was under immense pressure, but he cannot shake the feeling that she had a plan all along, that the fairy tale was never meant to last. He recalls small details that now seem like clues. Meghan's impatience with royal protocols, her desire to control media narratives, her frustration with being told what to wear and where to stand. He saw in her the same determination and independence that had driven her success in Hollywood. But this time, it clashed with an institution that was not designed to accommodate such autonomy. Thomas reflects on the media's portrayal of Meghan as both victim and villain. He acknowledges that the truth is probably somewhere in between. But what pains him most is that, in all the interviews and articles and documentaries, no one seems to have asked the question he can't stop asking. Did Meghan intend to leave from the very beginning? He describes feeling isolated, vilified by some, pitted by others. He knows that by speaking out, he risks further alienating his daughter. But he insists that he is motivated not by spite, but by a desire for honesty. He says he wants the world to understand his perspective, not to attack Meghan, but to explain the pain he feels as a father who no longer recognizes the person he once knew so well. Thomas shares memories of happier times. Meghan as a little girl, playing with their dogs, rehearsing lines in the living room, celebrating birthdays together. These memories are precious to him, but they are also painful reminders of what has been lost. He speaks about his hopes for reconciliation, even as he admits it may never come. He says he would welcome a call from Meghan, even if it were only to say goodbye properly. He wants to clear the air, to hear from her directly rather than through the media. Thomas ends the interview with a reflection on fame and family. He says that fame can distort relationships, turning genuine love into performance, sincerity into strategy. He wonders whether Meghan became trapped by the very image she worked so hard to create, a global icon, a symbol of independence and empowerment, but at the cost of personal connection. His final words are soft, almost a whisper. I still love her. I always will. But I wish I could understand who she really is now. His story sets the stage for what comes next, a deeper dive into the private emails that Thomas believes hold the key to understanding Meghan's true intentions, a side of the story the public has never fully heard. Thomas Markle recalls the evening vividly. The glow of the computer screen cast long shadows across his modest kitchen table as he scrolled through an old email thread that Meghan had once shared with him. It was late, and he was alone with his thoughts, a routine that had become all too familiar since his daughter's rise to international fame. At first, he was simply reminiscing, looking back on earlier times when communication between them was easy and frequent. But as he reread the exchanges, one email caught his attention. It was a message Meghan had forwarded to him from a close confidant during the early days of her relationship with Harry. It seemed casual on the surface, filled with emojis and casual language. But buried within it was a sentence that would later gnaw at him endlessly. 2 years, max, and then I can be free to do what I want on my terms. Thomas leaned back in his chair, rereading the line. Free? What did Meghan mean by that? Free from what? She was writing this during what the world assumed was a whirlwind romance full of genuine emotion, a fairy tale come to life. But here she was, suggesting a timeline, a plan, an endgame, all before she was even engaged. This phrase, innocuous to anyone else, suddenly took on a much darker significance for Thomas. At the time, he dismissed it as an offhand remark, maybe even a joke between friends. But now, in light of everything that had happened, the withdrawal from royal duties, the legal battles with the press, the relentless media management, the sudden relocation to North America, it felt like a clue that had been hidden in plain sight. He describes the sick feeling that came over him as he realized that this wasn't the only line that hinted at a broader strategy. The entire thread of emails contained casual remarks about maximizing exposure and setting the narrative early. His daughter, who once seemed so spontaneous and genuine, was discussing her relationship with Harry in terms more akin to a marketing plan than a love story. Thomas recalls another email in which Meghan confided in a friend about the opportunities this new relationship presented. The palace is the ultimate platform, she wrote. Think about what that kind of visibility could mean for everything I want to build. Everything she wanted to build. The phrasing struck him. It was forward-looking, self-focused, transactional even. There was little mention of love or commitment. Instead, the tone centered on opportunity and positioning. In one message, Meghan described feeling constrained even before formally joining the royal family. She wrote about the rigid protocols, the endless briefings, the requirement to seek approval for every public statement or gesture. It's going to be hard, she admitted to her friend. But if I play this right, I can have the influence I've always dreamed of. Thomas couldn't help but interpret this as a blueprint for the future. Endure the restrictions for a period of time, build global recognition, then walk away with full control of her own narrative and brand. He recalls how hurtful it was to read those words, not just as a father, but as someone who believed in sincerity. For Thomas, relationships, particularly marriage, were built on emotional honesty and trust. Reading Meghan's emails, he felt as if he had glimpsed a version of her that was unfamiliar, coldly strategic. These emails became a lens through which he began reinterpreting every milestone in Meghan's royal journey. He remembers watching her dazzling wedding, every detail choreographed for maximum impact. The way she carried herself, the confident smiles, the carefully curated speeches, all now seemed less like the organic gestures of a woman in love and more like calculated moves on a chessboard. Thomas admits that part of him tried to rationalize it at the time. He wanted to believe Meghan was overwhelmed, that she was simply adapting to the pressures of public life. But the pattern was too consistent. The complaints about protocol, the frustration with palace aides, the relentless focus on media image, it all seemed to reflect a woman who was never fully committed to royal life, but rather to what that life could provide. He remembers one particular email that chilled him. Meghan wrote to her friend, "They don't know what's coming. I'll set the agenda. 2 years is all it will take. They don't know what's coming." That line, Thomas says, now echoes in his mind whenever he reads a new headline about Meghan and Harry's post-royal ventures. The lucrative Netflix deal, the high-profile interviews, the carefully controlled public appearances. It suggests, to Thomas at least, that Meghan always intended to leave on her terms, that the institution of monarchy was merely a stepping stone to something greater, the consolidation of her own power, influence, and brand. Yet Thomas doesn't speak of these emails as a smoking gun or as an act of betrayal in the traditional sense. Instead, he reflects on them with deep sadness and confusion. He wonders whether this side of Meghan, ambitious, calculating, driven by image, had always been present but hidden from him, or whether fame had transformed her into someone he no longer recognized. As he recounts the details, Thomas speaks about the moment when he realized these emails might explain everything that had happened since the wedding. The breakdown in communication, the cold distance, the apparent indifference to family ties. All of it now seemed to make sense in light of what Meghan had written years earlier. Thomas also describes the internal conflict these emails sparked in him. Should he have confronted Meghan at the time? Should he have asked her directly about what she meant? Would doing so have changed anything? He admits that fear held him back. Fear of alienating her further, of being accused of misunderstanding or overreacting. Now, years later, with their relationship reduced to silence and occasional barbed remarks in the press, Thomas wonders whether these emails were always meant to be his warning. A glimpse into a side of Meghan that he hadn't fully appreciated. The side that understood how to navigate and manipulate public perception, how to harness the machinery of fame for personal ends. He remembers one line near the end of the email chain that continues to haunt him. "The world will love what I show them, and I'll decide what that is." In that sentence, Thomas believes, lies the heart of Meghan's approach to life in the spotlight. She would curate her image, reveal only what served her purpose, and leave behind anything that didn't fit the narrative she wished to construct. For Thomas, these emails serve not as an indictment of Meghan's character, but as a painful revelation of how far apart their worlds had become. He describes them as a window into a mindset that prioritizes control over connection, image over intimacy. He acknowledges that some will question his motives for sharing this story now. Critics will say he is bitter, that he is seeking attention or revenge. But Thomas insists that his motivation is more complex. He says he wants people to understand why he feels so estranged from his daughter, why he can no longer recognize the woman he once adored. He concludes this chapter of his story by reflecting on the profound sadness that accompanies fame. Fame changes people, he says quietly. Or maybe it just reveals who they really are. Thomas's discovery of these private emails marks a turning point, not just in his relationship with Meghan, but in how he has come to understand the entire saga of her royal life. For him, these messages explain everything. The sudden rise, the calculated departure, the carefully constructed narrative that now dominates public discourse. As we move forward, we will examine how Meghan's Hollywood background may have shaped this mindset, and whether this same calculated approach was evident even before she met Prince Harry. Thomas Markle often reflects that Meghan's approach to her royal life cannot be separated from the world she came from, Hollywood. To understand Meghan's mindset, Thomas argues, you have to understand what it means to survive and thrive in an industry where image is currency and reinvention is a survival strategy. Hollywood is a world where relationships are often transactional, where branding is essential, and where timing can make or break a career. Thomas recalls watching Meghan learn these lessons from an early age. She was exposed to show business not just from her own ambitions, but through his own work as a lighting director. He would take her onto sets, and even as a child, she seemed to grasp the unspoken rules of performance, perception, and public image. He describes moments when Meghan, as a teenager, would observe the actors on set and intuitively understand what gave them power. She watched how they carried themselves, how they negotiated their contracts, how they worked the media to protect their reputations or advance their careers. Thomas says Meghan absorbed those lessons not just as an observer, but as a student. As she entered adulthood, Meghan pursued acting with relentless focus. The entertainment industry is notoriously unforgiving, but Thomas says Meghan seemed to embrace the challenge. Every rejection became fuel for her drive. She learned to cultivate an image that was both approachable and aspirational. The girl next door who could still command attention on a red carpet. Thomas explains that this was not deception, it was professionalism. In Hollywood, actors are expected to project confidence, polish, and perfection at all times. Vulnerability must be carefully managed, and authenticity is often a carefully curated illusion. Thomas says Meghan mastered this delicate balance early in her career. By the time she landed her breakout role on Suits, Meghan had already built a personal brand that extended far beyond her on-screen character. She was an influencer before the term had entered popular culture, carefully crafting her social media presence, engaging with lifestyle brands, and building an audience that admired her not just as an actress, but as a modern, empowered woman. Thomas believes that this experience shaped the way Meghan approached every aspect of her life. Hollywood taught her that narratives can be crafted, that perception is more powerful than reality, and that success often depends on controlling your own story before someone else controls it for you. When Meghan's relationship with Harry became public, Thomas remembers noticing how seamlessly she transitioned from actress to royal girlfriend. She understood the cameras, the choreography of public appearances, and the way to deliver a soundbite that would dominate headlines. Where other newcomers might have stumbled under the glare of royal media scrutiny, Meghan appeared confident, poised, and practiced. Thomas says that many interpreted this as grace under pressure, but he now sees it differently. To him, it was evidence of a woman who knew exactly how to manage her image, who understood that being Harry's partner was not just a personal relationship, but a platform. She embraced the role, but she did so on her own terms. He recalls that even in the earliest stages of their courtship, Meghan appeared aware of the potential for influence. Friends of hers have described how she researched royal history, studied protocol, and familiarized herself with key players in the palace hierarchy. Thomas says that rather than being intimidated by the centuries-old institution she was marrying into, Meghan seemed energized by the possibilities it presented. The careful curation extended beyond public appearances. Thomas points out that Meghan's social circle changed rapidly after she entered the royal orbit. Friends from her earlier days became less visible, while new connections, often high-profile figures in media, fashion, and politics, appeared in her life. Thomas believes this was not accidental, but a deliberate recalibration of her image to match her new status. He also speaks about Meghan's understanding of modern media ecosystems. She was fluent in the language of Instagram, blogs, and personal branding long before the British royal family had begun to adapt to the realities of 21st-century communication. Where the palace operated with rigid press releases and carefully choreographed interviews, Meghan understood the value of immediacy, of controlling the message in real time. Thomas points to Meghan's now-defunct lifestyle blog, The Tig, as an early example of her ability to present an aspirational, highly curated version of herself. The blog was not just a collection of personal essays and recommendations. It was a manifesto for a lifestyle that blended sophistication, independence, and empowerment. Thomas says that The Tig reflected Meghan's understanding that audiences don't just follow celebrities, they want to emulate them. This mindset, Thomas argues, never left her. When she entered royal life, she brought Hollywood with her, not just in style, but in strategy. She approached engagements, speeches, and even scandals as opportunities to craft her narrative, to frame herself as a relatable yet aspirational figure. Thomas says this approach often clashed with the royal family's traditions. The palace's communication strategy was built around restraint, deference, and collective identity. Individualism was discouraged in favor of a unified royal image. But Meghan's Hollywood mindset prioritized personal narrative, personal branding, and personal control. Thomas believes that this cultural clash was inevitable. While palace aides may have interpreted Meghan's insistence on doing things differently as rebellious or difficult, Thomas sees it as the natural consequence of a woman who had spent her entire adult life navigating the competitive, image-obsessed world of Hollywood. He recounts conversations he had with Meghan during her Suits years, when she would describe media coverage as a game to be played and mastered. She knew how to leak stories to favorable outlets, how to build relationships with influential journalists, and how to shift narratives when necessary. Thomas says this expertise became more evident during her time as a royal, as she sought to position herself as both a royal insider and an outsider speaking truth to power. Thomas also reflects on the way Meghan's Hollywood background shaped her response to criticism. In the entertainment industry, criticism is constant, and celebrities develop thick skins or find ways to reframe the narrative. Thomas believes Meghan carried this same attitude into her royal life, but the scale and intensity of British tabloid scrutiny presented new challenges. While the palace may have advised silence or stoicism in response to negative press, Thomas says Meghan instinctively sought to counteract bad publicity with her own version of events. This led to conflicts not just with the media, but with palace staff, who were unaccustomed to such an assertive media strategy. Thomas wonders whether Meghan's Hollywood mindset made it impossible for her to fully adapt to royal life. In Hollywood, adaptability and reinvention are celebrated. In the royal family, consistency and tradition are paramount. Meghan, Thomas believes, was always going to chafe at the restrictions of royal protocol because those restrictions limited her ability to define her own narrative. Yet Thomas does not paint this as a purely negative trait. He acknowledges that Meghan's ambition and strategic thinking were also the qualities that propelled her from modest beginnings to global fame. He says these same qualities made her a compelling figure, admired by millions around the world. But he questions whether those qualities were ever compatible with the role she married into. As Thomas speaks about Meghan's Hollywood mindset, he reflects on his own role in shaping her ambitions. He encouraged her to dream big, to pursue her goals, to refuse to accept limits. He wonders now whether that encouragement contributed to a mindset that prioritized image and achievement over family and connection. Thomas admits that he is proud of Meghan's accomplishments, but he is also deeply saddened by what those accomplishments have cost their relationship. He sees in her Hollywood mindset both the key to her success and the root of their estrangement. As this chapter closes, Thomas reflects on the inevitability of Meghan's clash with royal life. He believes that from the moment she entered the palace, the conflict between her Hollywood mindset and royal tradition was set in motion. And in that conflict, he says, lies the key to understanding not just Meghan's choices, but the entire saga of her rise, her departure, and her reinvention. The next chapter will examine the early days of Meghan and Harry's courtship and explore whether signs of this cultural and strategic clash were evident from the very beginning. The story of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's relationship has often been told as a modern fairy tale. A charming American actress meets a British prince, sparks fly, and a global romance unfolds. Yet, behind the romantic headlines and public appearances, Thomas Markle and some insiders suggest a different narrative, one tinged with calculation and strategy from the very start. Thomas recalls the day Meghan told him about Harry. He remembers her excitement, but also an undercurrent of ambition in her voice. To Thomas, it was clear Meghan recognized the unique opportunity Harry represented, not just as a partner, but as a gateway to a global stage. As their courtship became public, the media frenzy was relentless. Paparazzi followed their every move, speculating on the nature and depth of their relationship. But while the public saw romance and glamour, Thomas and others saw calculated moves designed to position Meghan favorably within an institution notoriously resistant to outsiders. One of the first signs Thomas points to is how quickly Meghan adapted to royal expectations, but on her own terms. Unlike other royal partners who spent years acclimating to palace life, Meghan seemed to accelerate the process, mastering protocols and media appearances with uncanny speed. Thomas argues this rapid adaptation was less about fitting in and more about establishing control over her narrative. Insiders also recall Meghan's deliberate approach to crafting her public image during this period. She was conscious of the importance of messaging and carefully selected moments to share with the press. Public statements were polished, charity engagements were strategically chosen, and even wardrobe choices seemed aimed at sending subtle signals. Modern, approachable, yet regal. Thomas recounts how Meghan surrounded herself with a team skilled in media relations and brand management. This team helped navigate the delicate balance between royal tradition and contemporary celebrity culture. According to Thomas, Meghan was deeply involved in these decisions, asserting her preferences and shaping how she was presented to the world. This level of control surprised palace officials, who were accustomed to a more deferential approach from royal partners. Thomas believes that Meghan's insistence on maintaining autonomy signaled an early intention not just to join the royal family, but to use her position as a platform for personal influence. The timeline of Meghan and Harry's relationship also raises questions. From their first meeting to the engagement announcement was just over a year, a rapid progression by royal standards. Thomas wonders if this accelerated timeline was partly driven by Meghan's desire to secure her position before opposition within the palace could mount. Additionally, Thomas points to reports of Meghan's past relationships and friendships as part of a broader strategy. He recalls hearing rumors of calculated social moves, cultivating connections that could later serve as leverage in her new royal role. While some may dismiss these as typical social maneuvering, Thomas sees a pattern consistent with someone building a network for long-term influence. Harry's own position within the royal family further complicates the story. The younger son, often seen as rebellious and eager to carve his own path, may have been receptive to Meghan's vision of a modernized monarchy. Thomas believes Meghan's ambition resonated with Harry's desire for independence, making them partners not just in love, but in a shared plan to redefine royal life. However, Thomas cautions that Harry may not have been fully aware of the extent of Meghan's strategy. He suggests that Meghan's experience and media savvy gave her an advantage in shaping the narrative around their relationship, while Harry, raised within royal tradition, struggled to reconcile public expectations with private realities. Public reactions to the courtship were mixed. Supporters praised Meghan's modernizing influence and openness, while critics accused her of being manipulative and overly ambitious. Thomas feels the latter viewpoint is often ignored in mainstream narratives, but he believes it offers important insight into the dynamics behind the headlines. He recalls conversations with friends and acquaintances who noticed Meghan's calculated approach early on. Some described her as highly focused and determined, willing to do whatever it took to succeed. While ambition is not inherently negative, Thomas believes it became problematic when it conflicted with the values of openness and family. The wedding itself, often portrayed as a fairy tale, carries hints of this calculated courtship. Thomas remembers moments where Meghan seemed to assert her control, from the guest list to the choreography of the ceremony. He notes how she appeared comfortable managing the intense media spotlight, often directing attention with poise and precision. Thomas also describes how Meghan's absence of close family members, including himself, created a narrative of distance and exclusivity. He believes this was part of a broader strategy to craft an image of independence and self-sufficiency, distancing herself from potential sources of scrutiny or conflict. The media's portrayal of the couple during this time was overwhelmingly positive, highlighting their youth, love, and progressive values. But beneath the surface, Thomas and others sensed tension between palace tradition and Meghan's ambitions, between private reality and public image. As the courtship progressed, the cracks began to show. Palace insiders reported clashes over protocol, disagreements about roles and expectations, and concerns about Meghan's influence over Harry. Thomas believes these conflicts were inevitable, given the fundamental differences in background and mindset. He questions whether the courtship was a genuine romance or a strategic alliance aimed at achieving specific goals. While he acknowledges that love may have played a role, he argues that ambition was always intertwined with affection. Thomas's perspective challenges the commonly accepted narrative of Meghan and Harry's relationship as a love story disrupted by external pressures. Instead, he paints a picture of a relationship built on mutual benefit, with Meghan's ambitions playing a central role. This chapter ends with a reflection on the nature of love and ambition. Thomas asks whether it is possible for the two to coexist without causing pain and betrayal. He wonders if Meghan and Harry's story might serve as a cautionary tale about the costs of mixing personal relationships with public ambition. The next chapter will take a closer look at Meghan's wedding day, exploring how the events and decisions of that day may have foreshadowed the challenges to come. The wedding day of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry on May 19, 2018, was hailed around the world as a historic moment, a dazzling celebration blending royal tradition with contemporary flair. Crowds gathered at Windsor Castle, millions watched on television, and the press praised what seemed to be a fresh, hopeful chapter for the British monarchy. Yet beneath the glittering surface, there were signs and undercurrents that only a few saw, and even fewer understood. Thomas Markle remembers the day with mixed emotions. He watched the spectacle from a modest home far from the grandeur of Windsor, his heart heavy with a sense of exclusion. Having been sidelined due to health issues and a series of misunderstandings, Thomas's absence from the ceremony created an early rift, one that, in his eyes, symbolized a deeper divide within the family and foreshadowed the challenges that lay ahead. According to Thomas, the wedding day was not just a union of two people, but a meticulously orchestrated performance, one where every smile, every glance, and every gesture was carefully choreographed to convey a narrative. To the public, Meghan appeared radiant and serene, but Thomas and close insiders suggest there were moments when the pressure of the day was visibly weighing on her. The ceremony itself adhered to royal protocols, but incorporated personal touches that Meghan insisted on. These choices were not merely aesthetic. They reflected a desire to redefine what a royal wedding could look like. From the inclusion of a gospel choir to the sermon by Bishop Michael Curry emphasizing racial justice and love, the wedding carried subtle but powerful messages aimed at signaling change and progress. Thomas recalls how Meghan's approach to the wedding differed from that of previous royal brides. She was involved deeply in the planning, pushing for elements that highlighted her values and background. This level of involvement was unusual in the palace context, where senior staff typically guide every detail to maintain tradition. Some palace insiders reportedly viewed Meghan's insistence as a sign of control and a challenge to the established order. While others admired her vision, it's clear that her active role set a precedent that disrupted the usual flow of royal weddings. Thomas also points to the carefully curated guest list as indicative of Meghan's strategic mindset. Many of her close family members, including Thomas himself, were notably absent, while celebrities and influential figures from the arts and social justice communities were prominently included. Thomas believes this was a deliberate move to craft an image aligned with Meghan's personal brand, one of inclusivity, modernity, and celebrity influence. The dress Meghan wore, designed by Claire Waite Keller, also carried symbolism. It was simple yet elegant, featuring subtle details like the flora of the Commonwealth countries embroidered into the fabric. While widely praised, Thomas suggests the choice was another calculated element, blending tradition with individuality to reinforce Meghan's unique position as a royal outsider and trendsetter. Throughout the day, Meghan projected confidence, but Thomas recalls that in private moments, she appeared tense and guarded. He suspects that beneath the public smile was a woman grappling with immense pressure, the weight of expectations from the palace, the media, and the world. One of the most talked about moments came during the carriage procession through Windsor, when Meghan and Harry waved to the crowds. The couple's expressions and body language were scrutinized by experts and fans alike. Thomas interprets Meghan's poised demeanor as evidence of her preparation and understanding of public optics, reflecting a performer's mindset more than a nervous bride. The ceremony also featured speeches and readings that hinted at the couple's values and vision. Archbishop Justin Welby's sermon emphasized humility and service, while the guests' reactions suggested a mix of support and unease. Thomas wonders whether these moments masked deeper tensions within the royal family and between Meghan and palace officials. The absence of Thomas Markle himself cast a long shadow over the day. His heart condition and the fallout from paparazzi photos meant he was unable to walk Meghan down the aisle, a tradition laden with emotional significance. Thomas describes the pain of watching from afar, feeling both pride in his daughter and profound sorrow at their estrangement. This absence also contributed to a narrative that Meghan was distancing herself from her family, reinforcing perceptions of exclusivity and independence. Some critics interpreted this as coldness or even arrogance, though Thomas insists it was more complicated, a mix of circumstances and choices. Beyond the ceremony, the reception and private celebrations further reflected Meghan's influence. The couple's choices in music, food, and decor were imbued with personal and cultural significance. These elements highlighted Meghan's desire to blend her heritage with royal tradition, creating a wedding that was uniquely theirs. Yet, some palace watchers viewed these choices as part of a broader pattern of Meghan asserting control over her public image. Thomas believes the wedding was not just a celebration of love, but a carefully crafted debut, a public statement that set the tone for Meghan's royal journey. In the days following the wedding, the media buzzed with praise and speculation. Meghan was lauded as a modernizing force, a symbol of diversity and change. But beneath the surface, palace insiders were reportedly wary of the challenges her presence posed to long-standing traditions and expectations. Thomas reflects on the wedding day as a turning point, a moment when Meghan's ambitions and strategic mindset became fully visible. He sees it as the day when the fairy tale took on a new, more complex dimension. For Thomas, the wedding was both a proud milestone and the beginning of a painful distancing. It highlighted the contradictions between public celebration and private conflict, between personal dreams and institutional realities. This chapter closes with Thomas's hope that the truth about the wedding day, its beauty, its tension, and its deeper meanings, will someday be fully understood. He believes that only by acknowledging these complexities can the public appreciate the true story behind the spectacle. Next, we will explore Meghan's early clashes with royal protocol, the moments when her Hollywood mindset collided head-on with the palace's traditions. From the moment Meghan Markle stepped into the royal fold, tensions began to simmer beneath the surface. The palace, with its centuries-old customs and unyielding traditions, was a world far removed from the fast-paced, image-driven environment Meghan had known in Hollywood. These differences quickly manifested as clashes, some subtle, others more overt, that hinted at the challenges the couple would face in reconciling their worlds. Thomas Markle recalls early signs of discord shortly after the wedding. He mentions hearing whispers from palace insiders about Meghan's growing impatience with the rigid protocols that governed royal life. What seemed like minor grievances to the public were, in reality, significant points of friction within an institution that prized order and discretion above all else. One of the first areas where Meghan pushed back was in public appearances. The royal family had long operated under strict guidelines about how and when members could interact with the media. Yet, Meghan's Hollywood background had ingrained in her a different approach, one that valued engagement, storytelling, and controlling the narrative through proactive communication. Thomas describes how Meghan frequently expressed frustration at being told what she could or couldn't say during interviews and events. She wanted to speak openly about issues close to her heart, including racial equality, mental health, and women's empowerment. While these causes aligned with the modern image the monarchy wished to project, the method of delivery sometimes clashed with the palace's preference for measured statements vetted through multiple layers of approval. These clashes extended beyond public statements. Meghan reportedly resisted some traditional dress codes and protocols during official engagements. For example, she opted for outfits and accessories that reflected her personal style, even if they deviated from palace expectations. While such choices may seem minor to observers, palace officials viewed them as a challenge to the uniformity and decorum the institution sought to maintain. Another early flashpoint involved the royal staff assigned to support Meghan and Harry. Sources described a turbulent working environment where aides struggled to meet Meghan's expectations for privacy, media management, and personal space. Some staffers reportedly felt undermined when Meghan took direct control of scheduling and communication, bypassing traditional channels. Thomas notes that these tensions were not simply personality clashes, but stemmed from a fundamental cultural mismatch. The palace operated on deference, hierarchy, and tradition, while Meghan brought a more assertive, individualistic approach shaped by her career in the entertainment industry. This cultural gap was compounded by the intense media scrutiny that accompanied Meghan's every move. The British press, historically unforgiving of royal missteps, began to scrutinize her behavior closely. Meghan's reactions, whether direct or through carefully managed channels, sometimes fed the cycle of tension, drawing both criticism and sympathy. Thomas recalls an incident early in Meghan's royal life when she chose to use social media platforms more actively than previous members of the royal family. While the move was applauded by younger audiences, palace officials reportedly viewed it as risky and unconventional. The tension between embracing modern communication and maintaining traditional discretion became a recurring theme. Further complicating matters were Meghan's efforts to address personal and family issues publicly, breaking with royal norms of privacy. She spoke openly about her struggles with mental health and experiences of racism, subjects that, while important, were considered taboo in palace circles. These candid revelations drew both praise for their honesty and criticism for their perceived breach of protocol. Thomas believes that Meghan's willingness to challenge established boundaries was both a strength and a source of conflict. She sought to modernize the monarchy, making it more relatable and transparent, but her approach unsettled an institution steeped in tradition. Within the family, these early clashes sparked concern. Senior royals reportedly debated how best to manage Meghan's influence and navigate the media storms that often followed her statements and actions. Some viewed her as a breath of fresh air, while others feared the erosion of royal discipline. Thomas also points to Meghan's close relationship with Harry as a factor in these tensions. He suggests that Harry, eager to support his wife, sometimes shielded her from palace protocols, further complicating the internal dynamics. This protective stance, while understandable, may have unintentionally deepened divisions. The media played a critical role in amplifying these conflicts. Tabloids and commentators often framed Meghan as difficult or demanding, creating a narrative of palace discord. Thomas feels this portrayal overlooked the complexity of adapting to an institution that was, in many ways, resistant to change. Despite the challenges, Thomas acknowledges Meghan's commitment to her causes and her desire to make a positive impact. He believes that her frustrations with protocol reflected genuine efforts to modernize royal life, even if the methods clashed with tradition. He also reflects on how these early clashes may have sown the seeds for later decisions, including the Sussexes' eventual decision to step back from royal duties. The pressure of navigating these cultural and institutional conflicts, combined with intense media scrutiny, created an environment that tested the couple's resilience. Thomas's insights paint a picture of an institution struggling to adapt to modern realities, and of a woman whose ambition and vision both inspired and unsettled those around her. These early tensions set the stage for the dramatic events that would unfold in the years to come. The next chapter will explore Meghan's growing focus on public relations and media control, how she sought to shape her image amid increasing scrutiny and internal palace challenges. As Meghan Markle's royal journey progressed, one of the most defining aspects of her experience became her growing emphasis on public relations and media control. For someone who came from Hollywood's spotlight, managing her image was second nature. But within the palace walls, this approach was both unprecedented and controversial. Thomas Markle observed how Meghan quickly learned the power of narrative management. Unlike traditional royals, who often relied on palace communications teams and official spokespeople to handle public messaging, Meghan took a much more hands-on role. She was keenly aware that in today's media landscape, controlling the story was essential, not just reacting to headlines, but actively shaping perceptions. From the outset, Meghan surrounded herself with a skilled team of media professionals who understood the nuances of both British and American press. These advisors helped her craft messages, plan appearances, and respond swiftly to negative coverage. Thomas notes that this media-savvy approach was unlike anything the palace had seen before. One of Meghan's earliest and most visible moves was the launch of her now-defunct lifestyle blog, The Tig. Though it predated her royal status, the blog was an early indicator of her understanding of personal branding. Through curated content on food, travel, and wellness, Meghan presented a polished and relatable image that resonated with a broad audience. Thomas sees this as a blueprint for how she intended to manage her public persona within the royal context. Thomas recalls how Meghan insisted on maintaining control over her public engagements and media interactions. She reportedly pushed back against palace officials who attempted to micromanage her schedule or dictate her messaging. This assertiveness created tension behind the scenes, as royal aides were unaccustomed to such a degree of autonomy. This desire for control extended to how Meghan and Harry handled press stories about their personal lives. Unlike previous generations of royals who often endured tabloid scrutiny silently, Meghan was proactive in issuing denials, legal threats, or counter-narratives. Thomas describes this as a strategic attempt to fight fire with fire, using legal avenues and media statements to protect the couple's image. Yet, this approach was a double-edged sword. While it allowed Meghan to push back against false or invasive stories, it also heightened media attention and, at times, provoked further backlash. The British tabloid press, known for its aggressive coverage of royals, responded with increased scrutiny and sensationalism. Thomas notes that Meghan's media strategy was influenced by her Hollywood background, where managing public relations crises is routine. However, he suggests that the palace's more traditional, restrained communication style clashed with Meghan's assertive approach, leading to misunderstandings and frustration on both sides. One particularly notable example was the decision by Meghan and Harry to step away from traditional royal communications channels in favor of their own social media presence and direct engagement with the public. This move disrupted decades of established protocol and was viewed by some palace officials as undermining the institution's collective voice. Thomas recalls hearing reports of palace staff feeling sidelined as Meghan took control of communications decisions. Some aides reportedly struggled to adapt to the couple's independent approach, which sometimes bypassed traditional channels and protocols. This pivot to media control also involved careful management of public appearances. Meghan's team meticulously planned engagements to maximize positive coverage and align with her personal brand. Causes such as gender equality, racial justice, and mental health became focal points, allowing Meghan to position herself as a socially conscious royal with a modern agenda. Thomas emphasizes that while these causes are important, Meghan's approach was often intertwined with the desire to shape her public image. He argues that the messaging was as much about personal brand building as it was about genuine advocacy. The intense media focus on Meghan also led to increased legal battles. Meghan and Harry took legal action against several British tabloids, citing harassment and invasion of privacy. Thomas sees these actions as part of a broader strategy to assert control over their narrative and deter invasive reporting. However, these legal battles came at a cost. They further strained relations within the palace and contributed to the couple's growing sense of isolation. Thomas believes that Meghan's confrontational stance against the media was a reflection of both frustration and a desire to protect her family. Behind the scenes, Thomas describes a palace grappling with how to respond to Meghan's unprecedented media approach. The institution, built on discretion and tradition, found itself challenged by a new kind of royal who operated with a Hollywood-style media playbook. This chapter highlights the complexity of Meghan's media management strategy, a blend of empowerment, control, and adaptation. Thomas acknowledges that Meghan's approach was effective in many ways, but also recognizes the tensions it created within an institution slow to change. As we move forward, the next chapter will delve into the period leading up to Archie's birth, exploring the hints of an exit strategy and the growing realization that Meghan's time in the royal family might be limited. As Meghan Markle's pregnancy with Archie progressed, subtle signs began to emerge that suggested her time within the royal family might not be as permanent as the world had assumed. Thomas Markle, reflecting on this period, believes that these early months were marked by growing tensions and private discussions that hinted at an exit strategy being formulated well before the public announcement. Thomas recalls conversations he had with acquaintances close to Meghan and Harry during this time. While the couple publicly embraced their expanding family with warmth and joy, behind closed doors, the atmosphere was reportedly more fraught. Sources spoke of disagreements about the pressures of royal life, concerns over privacy, and the intense scrutiny that seemed to intensify as Meghan's pregnancy became more visible. One key element, Thomas emphasizes, was Meghan's increasing desire for autonomy and control over how she and her child would be presented to the public. He suggests that the challenges of navigating palace protocols alongside her own ambitions created a growing sense of confinement, prompting discussions about alternative paths. Thomas points to reports that Meghan and Harry engaged in private talks about relocating abroad long before Archie's birth. These discussions, he says, reflected a strategic calculation, an acknowledgement that royal life, while prestigious, came with limitations that conflicted with their vision.